Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Dick Palmer. I'm president of the Tea Party here in Laguna Woods, and I'm here with two special guests. There is Mark Ang. He's a political activist here in Orange County, and we had Rodriguez, who is running for state controller.
Rodriguez.
Rodriguez.
Rodriguez. Yes.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem. It happens all the time. Trust me.
Anyway, I'm very excited to have these two gentlemen here today because they're going to be discussing California politics and especially trying to get into elected offices so we can start turning the state around, which is a big disaster. So we're trying to get people who know who to vote for. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mark Ang.
Yeah, thank you, Dick, so much for having us. And I'm so excited also to have Konstantinos Rodriguez, our candidate for state controller, which a lot of people don't know is actually a very important position that handles our expenses. And this state is definitely swimming in bad expenses and bad decisions, like a drunken person spending all their money on, at the slot machines in Vegas, or going on shopping sprees and not realizing they're in the red. I mean, that's where California is. So hopefully we'll get to hear some solutions today, and thank you so much for having us.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Mm-hmm. So, what
go ahead, and Konstantinos.
Sure, my name is Konstantinos Rodriguez. I'm running for California State Controller, and one of the first things that people usually ask me is, what is a controller? What kind of they do? Because we have a treasurer and we have a controller. And in this state, we actually have an elected controller, which is very important because a lot of states don't have an elected controller, they're appointed. And so why do we have an elected controller in California? It's because the controller was designed to be the chief taxpayer watchdog, and that's why they have independent audit authority. So unlike the legislators or the governor, the controller is the only one that has that independent audit authority to open up the state books and root out corruption, waste, fraud, and abuse. And when they find corruption or they find waste or things that don't comply with the law, the controller can actually hold payments on things until it complies with state law. So one of the things that I really kind of point out to people is the high-speed rail. Now, besides that the current controller has not audited the high-speed rail, the high-speed rail is actually unlawful. Back in 2008, when we passed Prop 1A, it was not simply a bond. It actually had requirements that had to be met for funding to continue on with the high-speed rail. Three, for instance, of the things that were entailed in Prop 1A was there had to be federal and private funding investment into this project. Now, there is no more federal money and private money does not exist. So only the state is paying for it. The other requirement was actually the high-speed rail had to be high speed. So from 220 miles an hour that we were looking at, large stretches of the track we're looking up to 110 miles an hour. 1/3 of the track will have speed restrictions, and we're even going to be using Union Pacific lines. So we haven't, it's no longer high speed. It's not meeting the time requirements that were designed. And another one was simply at the end of the project, when it was built, there could not be any taxpayer subsidies. Conservatively, they say now at least $100 million per year to go ahead and subsidize it. So just looking at just those three things, we're not meeting those markers or that criteria which voters propose. So that's why on day one, I'm actually going to go ahead and stop funding of the high-speed rail until it complies with Prop 1A, or we go ahead and scrub it. So on day one, I'll be able to save taxpayers $100 billion.
That's wonderful, because this thing is it's a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't call it anything else. It's just ridiculous that they're spending that much money when the state's going to hell. Mm-hmm. So.
And how about our pensions, right? I mean, we got so many liabilities right now with people retiring at 41 even. That's actually not as uncommon as you think, and spending basically the rest of their lives collecting a paycheck that was equivalent to those 20 years they worked, but probably living till they're 100. So where does that make sense? I mean, it's starting to get the point of ridiculous. And I think really, and I speak here from a community perspective. For me, I have no aspirations to do anything in politics as far as a candidate. But I support candidates like Costas here, who's taken time out of his life and his business to serve, and to serve with integrity, and to serve to protect us, and to be an adult in the room. And I'm also happy to support John Cox for governor. John really embodies, and you can see in his candidate statement, I know a lot of you, the viewers are probably received your booklets in the mail. Read it and really read that statement, because unlike Gavin Newsom, who has no statement at all, John actually took the time to craft something very powerful and very, it's a straight shooting talk. It's what a concerned father would say to a son who is wayward and spending money like it means nothing. He's actually highlighting the problems in this state, and there's so much. We're not just talking about fiscal responsibility. We're talking about crime, public safety. There's a lot of issues there. Crime has shot up, and I've been a victim of crime myself. My vehicle got stolen in the city of Artesia, and that was very traumatizing for me, because I had just moved back from going to school in New York for 5 years. And I lived in an urban city where there's so many people going by. Nothing ever happened to my vehicle. But once I come back here, of course, I get robbed, and my car is found 12 days later in Compton. And so this is the type of thing that's going on when we suddenly don't have consequences for our criminals, and we're actually upping the thresholds of what they can get away with and what is no longer, felony territory. It's just a misdemeanor if you steal under $950 worth of property. So the criminals know this, and they work within that system and keep getting away with whatever they're getting away with. So that's enough. There's so many issues here that's just, our state faces, and it's crucial. And I really urge everyone to not be partisan about this, okay? It is so important to look at the state from a balanced perspective. Right now, one party, the Democrats, have a super majority, and they've rammed through all of these laws, and to the point that they're pushing laws on banning drinking straws. I mean, all of these, it's just so ridiculous. We have kids running Sacramento, and there are no adults in the room. Let's get adults like John and Constantinos in, because that is what's really needed.
Yeah, I agree. Well, what about this gasoline tax?
Oh, and we're speaking to the Yes on 6 chair. So
Co-chair with Carl DeMaio. So the Yes on 6 is crucially important, because people really need to realize what we've been doing with our money. So when you go ahead and increase anybody's taxes, I truthfully believe you have to be as efficient and effective with that money before you even have that discussion. And we haven't been using our money wisely, especially when you think about the gas tax hurts the poor and the working class the most. Over 1 in 5 Californians live in poverty, and 47% consider themselves working poor. So when you go ahead and put an increased tax that makes it harder for them from $650 to $800 a year, that is just immoral, and that is wrong. Because prior to the gas tax, only 20%, John Morlock, when he did his study, only 20% of the gas tax was going towards road repair. The Reason Foundation did a study, and they showed that up to 470% more we'll spend to maintain a mile of highway than other states. So we're not using our money efficiently and effectively. And once they passed SB1 gas tax, they went ahead and gave themselves a nice pay increase as well. So the top earners would get up to 15% over the next 2 years of a pay raise. So this was just a big money grab from the unions and big businesses, and you can see who's supporting the No on 6 movement, which is mostly less than about 200 people. Average contribution, big one, is about 250,000. Some people $1 million. When you look at our campaign, the Yes on 6 one, which is to repeal the gas tax increase, our average is $37 from thousands of people. This is a grassroots movement to take back our government in California and say, enough's enough.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that this gas tax that was shoved down the electorate's throats did not specifically earmark whatever revenues to road repairs. Am I correct on this?
Correct. There was no provision to say it mandated towards the roads. And the Orange County Register, I think about 2 weeks ago or so, reported that out of the SB1 money from the gas tax increase, $875.7 million has been awarded to projects that are dedicated to rail and consistent with the high-speed rail program. So basically, Metrolink is going to get that money and there's not going towards roads. So it's a lie to say it is going to be used for roads. They're going to use it for any single pet project they want. They'll probably divert some again into the general fund as they always done, and they're probably going to use it to shore up pensions.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Trump passed this regulation that people working for unions in California don't have to pay union dues because it's against their philosophy.
Oh, that was a Janus decision from the Supreme Court.
Supreme Court decision.
Yeah, okay. So what effect, that's like cutting off money for the unions, which...
I think it's going to take a while for us to see the effect of that decision, because right now the unions do have a lot of money in their coffers.
Right.
So right now, you know, this election cycle, it's not going to be apparent, but in future election cycles, we will see over the years the unions have less a grip on their workers, and therefore have less money to propagandize.
Yeah.
I'm a little worried. I don't think it will have as big of an effect as a lot of conservatives think. And the reason is, a lot of the times the insurance that comes, especially as teachers, of protecting them from getting sued, they will lose that if they leave the union. I have a friend who's a conservative, who's actually a union representative for the teachers, and he's going to stay on board for that protection. And also other seats, you know, where you can get promoted and move up, you know, just kind of knowing how sometimes the unions operate and strong arm. If you're not part of the union, I think it's going to be very difficult for you to basically get promoted and move up. And so it'll kind of be a strong arm thing. I suspect that's going to happen.
Wow.
So unfortunately, but that's kind of what I predict. Time will tell, but.
Right.
Valid points.
The other thing I'm concerned about is the water for Southern California and for Central Valley, which is dying because they don't get the water they need. What influence can you have on that?
Well, I mean, my role is administrative, not legislative. So just taking a look at the water situation and saying, how can I help advise and move things, you know, policies? We need to capture as much water as we possibly can. Not long ago, a couple years ago, I believe it was, the Los Angeles Times wrote an article and basically said, if we collected all the rainwater that falls down in LA, we would have enough water for LA for an entire year, even on its normal average rain cycle. So the number one thing is to capture our water and use it as efficiently, effectively as possible, and also make the environmental argument that saying over half the electricity the state uses is to move water. So if you're an environmentalist, you're going to tell me that, you know, burning fossil fuels to move water is more environmentally friendly, or storing it locally and utilizing it, which would mean cheaper water for residents, less electricity costs, fewer greenhouse gases. So it's all the benefits are to store locally as much as possible, and then for our farmers and everything else, using that water efficiently to go ahead and water our crops. We have enough water, rainwater in the state. We still don't need desalination. We have enough if we just use our water responsibly. And the problem is the Democratic Party has been overrun by environmentalists, you know, and I'm a conservationist, but you know, they're gone off the deep end, and they don't look at smart solutions that basically protect our environment and also help our residents and businesses.
Yeah, I know when I was in business, I was a technical advisor to the Energy Commission, and I was fighting the environmentalists because I'm also a conservationist. And you know, these environmentalists have too much influence over the laws in California.
No, and we need to do a lot of structural stuff. I mean, if you look at CEQA, that was actually passed by Ronald Reagan. So it was a well-intentioned law, but it's been used by environmentalists or other developers to make it difficult for another developer because they want to do a project. So it's been used kind of as a strong arm. So we really need to look at regulatory reforms, and that's why it's important for us to get John Cox elected, because he has said we want to, you know, get rid of CEQA and rewrite a new law that actually helps protect our environment, but is business friendly and moves projects forward. And he's the only one who wants to do that. So that's why it's important that we also elect John Cox.
Okay, great. Now, what about housing? It's usually boiling over. Housing in the market is going out of sight for the average person. What can we do to bring more housing in that would alleviate the shortage here?
I believe number one thing is regulatory reform. The Building Institute Association did a study, and they said that up to 40% of new homes built is due to regulations, and they can go through 45 different regulatory agencies and bodies.
Correct.
So when you do those sorts of things, just take a look. Why does it cost about $500,000 to buy a single-family resident home? I'm not talking about in Orange County. I'm talking about, Fontana or, other places in the middle of nowhere in California. Why does it cost so much? But when my parents bought their home in Las Vegas, they paid about $250,000, brand new built home, beautifully near the Strip. Why is it so cheap? It's because our regulations are so strenuous and cost so much to build and develop. The problem is that they want to look at things like rent control or government subsidizing of home. That's equivalent to saying I have an oil leak in my car, I have a hole in my oil pan, and my solution is to keep pouring as much oil as I possibly can in it and not actually say, how do I address the issue? And it's plug up that hole, change the oil pan.
Amen.
We need that regulatory reform. Any other thing that you're trying to do is just window dressing, will not help, and will make the situation just worse.
I mean, let's just say the Democrats and that party has been addicted to regulations, addicted to hampering any sort of progress. Contrary to themselves calling themselves progressives, they are actually regressing California to a place of, lack of productivity, something completely asinine like this. Us having to pay quadruple the equivalent of to build a house in Texas, for example. I mean, that's crazy. And where do that extra 300% of that money? Where is that going? That's going to the government, basically. So our government has gotten so big and out of control here that they feel that they can dictate what we do in all aspects of our lives, including what kind of straws we drink. So that's where we're at.
That straw deal really got to me.
Oh yeah, it's just symbolic. I know, a lot of people are going to say, why do the Republicans or conservatives keep harping on the straws? No, it's symbolic. I'm tired of the fact that they go and get paid these high salaries. They go to Sacramento, and this is all they could come up with. Instead of smart solutions like Constantino's is proposing, to actually do things that make sense and that make the world a better place and a more environmentally friendly place. Because I think we all want the same things. We all want safe streets. Right. We want to protect our environment. We want everyone to live free and not be bothered. We all share those same values. But it's so clear now, there's a demarcation line on what one party, the majority party, wants to do is power at any cost, and then the minority party, which wants to keep a checks and balance. So I really urge everyone, when you vote on November 6th, please look at everything and look at the candidates and really assess them, and also think bigger picture about how existing right now is Democratic supermajority. I think it is good to have an opposition party that makes some sort of balance in that.
Oh, absolutely. It just boggles my mind with all the rules that come out of Sacramento. I mean, I don't know how many bills Brown had to sign this last minute before. It's insane.
Yeah, I think we need to legitimately look at going to a part-time legislature. We're only 1 out of 4 states that has a full-time legislature with a large staff. Most states do not operate this way. We don't need to. And talking about the regulations, how bad it is, and even the environmental, let's take an issue here that everybody will have to deal with when their car gets older. You need to change your catalytic converter, for instance. Now, if you want to change your catalytic converter in California, you're going to typically spend like $600, even up to $1,000 to change your catalytic converter, because you have to have a carb stamp that went through all these testings or other things. Now, if I go to another state like Arizona, I can pick it up for $50 or $100 brand new, install it in my car, Now, will it pass the emission test? Absolutely. It'll go ahead and pass through flying colors, but you can't use it because it doesn't have that regulation. I can actually even put a catalytic converter, say, that would have better emission standards than the original one, or the one that's approved from CARB, but I couldn't put it on. The problem is here, you know, government needs to be setting the standards, not the means. And that the problem is, Sacramento keeps establishing, you must do this and you must do it this way, which kills productivity, which causes the rise of, you know, prices, and then also limits that competition, and you have a lot of crony capitalism that comes along with it. So you need to unleash the free market. You need to open up and have smart regulations that set standards, not means, and that's kind of how we're going to move forward and make California affordable for every Californian.
Yeah, I just heard that the Department of Motor Vehicles registered, I think, 28,000 illegal aliens so they can vote, and it was a mistake. It was, I guess the law was passed in 2015 allowing that to happen, but it just warped into this.
It's sad, and you know what? This is one thing that it's so important not only to vote for a good controller like Constantinos, but there's a Secretary of State position, and the Secretary of State is the person that's in charge of our fair elections. And what we've noticed is despite numerous instances of voter fraud and citizens trying to get some justice around that, like for example, just a few weeks ago when I saw you, I had mentioned 7 homeless people in Skid Row were found to be registering to vote, and certain people from a certain party were bribing them to do stuff like this. That got on Fox, KTLA or Fox, one of the local stations, and that got out there, but not to the extent that it should have, because you know we need, and the way to do this, it has to be top down in this case. We need to get a Secretary of State that will ensure fair and honest elections, and that's one of the other things that's on the ballot this November.
Right.
It's important that, you know, mix it up. Okay, I know that a lot of people are used to voting straight party ticket, but think about how that affects. If one party were to hold that entire state house, which we have a legislature and a governor of the same party, that's when overreach happens.
Right. Well, I don't know what to do. I mean, this election is going to be very important for everybody.
Very,
yes.
And I really thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I think it's important that people know what's going on, because we just don't have the coverage that, you know, Fox News handles it nationally, but locally.
And the local issues really are the most important, right? I mean, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
you know, we can get so obsessed with what's going on nationally, what the president's tweeting, or what the Senate Democrats were doing in the Kavanaugh process. I mean, we can get all riled up about that. But at the end of the day, the federal positions are just a few. And we're voting for all these people on school board, city council, state senator, state assembly, controller, all these positions, Secretary of State, all of these positions, we need to be very thoughtful, read those candidate statements, decide, you know, and take an ownership mentality. This is your state, you're living here. And if you're gonna complain about things like high gas prices, like broken roads, crime, all of these things that affect so many people, and if it doesn't affect us, it affects our loved ones. We have a responsibility to look and be part of that process, and to be very thoughtful and careful about that process. It's not just, oh, let's get a bunch of people out to vote because we're partisans. No, it's about actually being thoughtful.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that Newsom on his voter registration booklet had nothing on his record. I mean, how can he get away with that?
Oh, well, on the booklet, it's simple. He didn't want to take the expenditure limit for candidates. So you can, I don't know, can't remember exactly what the amount is. That's maybe $16 million or something of that is for the governor's race. So he said he's going to spend, in which he has spent more of it. So he doesn't get the right to put in a ballot statement into there, because he's taken huge amounts of money from big business corporations and unions.
Well, anyway, gentlemen, I'm delighted that you came here today for this interview. I think it was very enlightening, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dick. You're the best.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dick.
Thank you. That ends up our program today for bringing the election closer to home. At least these gentlemen are going to try and make everybody more aware of what's going on in the state. I'm really disappointed in the Sacramento with all the funny laws they passed, and it's like nobody's there to protect anybody. You know, it's everybody's game. I mean, I just can't believe it. But anyway, I really thank you guys for really showing up.
Thank you, Dick.
Thank you, Dick.
I
Appreciate
really
it.
enjoyed it. Thank you.